On this episode of Sega Talk, we talk the origins of the Sega logo and the Sega name. What are service games? What are standard games? And why is that logo blue? All this and more on Sega Talk. Sega Bits presents Sega Talk, a podcast talking all things Sega! With your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. Say what?
Hello and welcome to episode number 80 of Sega Talk. I'm Barry. With me is George.
Hello, everyone.
And on this interesting episode, we're not talking about a game. We're not talking about a person. We're not talking about an event. We are talking about the Sega logo itself, which you'd think, oh, you guys will probably fill like 15 minutes and then be done. But no, we're going the extra mile. We're going to be talking about lots of stuff that maybe you don't know about, maybe you do. But there will be a test at the end, so pay attention. Before we start, though, I just want to mention that if you support us on Patreon, you get to have this show 4 to 5 days early. You also, at certain tiers, get to tell us what to do, what you want covered. We're going to be having more announcements in the near future because we do have Swing and Report show live. So we're going to be integrating that. But right now I'm kind of taking a little pause on it because episode 100 is coming up and I want to have it be big. Like, no offense to anyone on the internet, but I don't want to be like, hey, it's a guy who also makes YouTube videos as our special 100th episode guest. But yeah, so this is going to be an interesting one. Sega has a very memorable blocky blue logo that has been around since 1976. But did you know that there is a whole 40 plus years of history before the iconic logo that we know and love hit the scene? So we're going to discuss not only the logo, but how we got there. So kicking things off, I really want to talk about the origins of the Sega name, because you can't talk about the logo in those 4 letters unless you know the background of it. And so I have, George, this image of like a timeline. And this is pulled from the Sega Retro Wiki. It's actually very helpful. It doesn't appear on every page, but it appears on certain pages. And when I saw this, I was like, oh, everything makes sense. So I figured put it up front. You guys can check it out. If you are listening to us, it basically shows from 1945 to 1984. And there are 3 columns. The top one shows service games, which I believe is the parent company. Below it, it shows service games Hawaii, Nevada, and Japan, which are kind of like the different subsidiaries or the different companies beneath it. And then from 60 to around 64, there's 2 companies, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then from there on, it's Sega Enterprises Limited, which we'll not be discussing this, so I'll just say right now, Gulf and Western at one point actually acquired Sega. And that's really weird because they are known for TVs. I think if anything, you might see a Gulf and Western TV at your great grandma's house.
I legit never heard of them.
Yeah, they just, I think they primarily made appliances, and they also owned a movie studio, I believe. I don't remember who it was, but it might have been Columbia Pictures.
Oh, okay. They went out of business.
That's not this episode. So, but interestingly, underneath Gulf and Western, there is, of course, Sega Enterprises, that we all know and love. But there's the Limited, there's the Incorporated, and then there's something called Sega and Gremlin. What's that? Well, we will touch on that too. So it just shows that Sega has always been changing and evolving. Sega Sammy, which is now the parent company, is relatively newish. That's the modern era, but you talk to some old school guys in the community, and I'm sure they're like, oh, I remember Gulf and Western very well.
I mean, you think there's really that many grandpas out there going Sega's cool, but Gulf and Western days were the best.
I bet there are people out there that at the very least really loved the Zaxxon Congo Bongo arcade era. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I forgot that they had Zaxxon. That was a big game.
huge game. And we actually will mention that. It does get a little mention here. But kicking things off, then, we have Service Games. And this is a really weird image that I'm putting up on the screen. But it's a notice of co-partnership. And I'll just read it here real quick. It says, notice is hereby given that on the first day of September 1946, the undersigned entered into a co-partnership doing business under the name and style of Service Games, maintaining and carrying on a repair, rental, and sales of coin-operated equipment business at 703 Moana Hotel. Hey, like the Disney movie Moana. Honolulu, Hawaii. They were operating out of a hotel.
Wow.
Witness our hands. I love this part. Witness our hands this first day of September 1946. Martin Bromberg. I think it's a misspelling. It's supposed to be Bromberg. Irving Bromberg and James L. Humpert. And that's important because despite Sega celebrating 60 years in 2020, as you can see here, Sega's origins can actually be traced all the way back to September 1st, 1946, with the establishment of Service Games in Hawaii. And that would actually make Sega 75 years old as we record this, which is kind of mind-blowing.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think that, Sega just thinking of Sega when they created the Sega name is more of... when you go to a company, do you call the origins before they got the real name? Like Namco, I'm pretty sure when they were called, what? Remember we did that whole, they had the two owners' names? I'm assuming they consider that their history, right? But this one, it's a little more iffy, right? They kind of mess around with the timeline a little more.
Yeah, and you're going to be seeing that the timeline definitely shifts. There's different dates you could point to as, the debut of Sega. Those guys I mentioned, so there's Irving Bromberg, his son Martin Jerome Bromberg, who later changed his name, I believe, to Marty Bromley or Martin Bromley, formed a partnership with this guy named James L. Humpert to manufacture and distribute slot machines and other coin-operated devices primarily to U.S. personnel stationed across Asia following World War II. And so, of course, because of this, the service in Service Games actually stands for the U.S. military service. So what are your thoughts on Sega's origins actually being U.S.-based and serving the military as opposed to really the Japanese company it's seen now?
I think this is always something that a lot of Sega fans talk about, right? When they're like, Sega makes Japanese games, and they always have that one guy. Well, actually, they made military operated coin-op machines. But yeah, it's weird. But I mean, how many companies do you think were built around the World War II and the fallout of World War II and the whole trading with Japan and opening up borders? Because I feel like that's just seems to be a big boom everywhere. Not just Sega, a bunch of other companies, even Asian companies to America really hit it more big when they opened up, Right, and I'm sure a ton of companies can point to that. I think, though, right here we're kind of seeing a very, very early point in Sega's history where if you're working at Sega of America in maybe the 90s or even 2000s, there is a source of pride there where you're like, we are not just a subsidiary of a Japanese... Or we're not just the U.S. office of a Japanese company, but we're kind of the originators of this whole thing because they had business in L.A. These guys. So, I mean, I totally get when Sega of America employees feel a little pride and feel like they should be doing more because it is technically it is an American company. From its very. And not only
early beginnings.
I was going to say, they also do the same exact thing. When they took over in Japan, it wasn't like they stopped doing arcade machines or anything like that. They continued that, and they went on to video game arcade machines and then consoles. But, it was still the same idea,
Right, and consoles are a blip in Sega's history. If you look at from 1932, really, all the way to now... Consoles took up, 20 years? 84, 94, 94? Less than 20 years, right? 1983 to 2001. That's nothing. And we've already surpassed the duration of time that Sega has been a console maker in this new third-party era. So I fully expect that in 20, 30 years, people are going to look back on Sega and the console thing is going to be a blip. I know people are going to get offended at me saying that, but like, honestly, it's just because it's such recent history. I mean, even now, we're now like in an era where people are just like getting really jazzed about Yakuza, Monkey Ball, and there seems to be less and less people going, I just think Sega should make consoles still. Like,
yeah.
I laughed at a dude on Facebook. I didn't reply to him or anything, but he was a dude on Facebook saying, like, I have no interest in Sega's modern games. I'm like, so you are basically living in 2001.
Pretty much.
Like,
and it's crazy.
And that's so long ago. It's so long ago now.
And, you know, even us that we've been covering Sega for so long, we used to see that, like, all the time. Remember that? Like, when it was, like, right. Yakuza would come out, like, Yakuza 2 or 3, they're like, oh, Shimmy looks better. I don't know why they're doing this crap. Now that's all like died out. It just really feels like it's just been a new wave for them as in popularity online, which is great. Yeah, I agree with you though. That kind of talk is dying out. The longer it goes.
Yeah, and you notice that with other franchise, I would like TV, movie franchises, but I think as a company, Sega is now really experiencing not only a renaissance in third party, but also a shift where it's predominantly people just enjoying their games and not being hung up on this past console thing. So getting back to the history, even going further back than service games, Irving Bromberg, I love that name. He was actually an innovator in coin-op machines and founded a company called Bromberg Company in 1933. And he also founded a company called Standard Games in Los Angeles, California in 1934 for the civilian market. So when World War II began, the Bromberg son, who changed his last name eventually to Bromley, which always makes the history of this confusing, he met Humpert at the U.S. Navy shipyard in Pearl Harbor following the start of the war. So I don't think they were there when Pearl Harbor was attacked. And a friendship and then the aforementioned service games partnership was formed. 1951 actually saw U.S. banning slot machines on military bases within U.S. territories, which forced service games to look into other avenues to sell products. And in 1952, they sent 2 salesmen named Richard Stewart, and then a mechanic named Raymond Lamille, to Japan to promote and expand sales of service games on U.S. military reservations because that whole ban wasn't affecting them. And the result, of course, was service games. Japan saw a network of factories springing up, and soon Service Games Japan was selling to Europe as well as parts of Asia, and it fast became really a major player in the slot machine market. And so that kind of brings us to the Sega 60th anniversary that they've been celebrating, because in May 1960, and I think this is a very valid date to point to for Sega Japan specifically, Service Games was liquidated, which sounds like a negative, but it was actually just, it's just something they had to go through. I think most recently we saw something like that with Warner Brothers, HBO. There was that whole shift with like AT&T, and they were like, we're divesting ourselves, and all these crazy things were happening. But end of the day, there were 2 entities. It was called Nihon Goraku Busan, which handled the distribution, and they had this thing called a trade name, which is basically a name to conduct business under that's simpler than your legal business name, which is why when we talk about Sega, we talk about Sega, not like Sega Sammy Holdings Incorporated or something like that. But it gets a little confusing because, as I mentioned, that Busan, they called themselves Udamatic Incorporated, which I think is maybe like a Japanese equivalent of Automatic, but it's like Utamatic. And then the other one is called Nihon Kikai Saizo, who handled manufacturing, and believe it or not, their trade name was Sega Incorporated. And I actually think the Busan, which is under Utamatic, is what Sega eventually became, which is kind of confusing because the other entity was called Sega. But to be quite honest, they were connected. They were both under the same ownership. I think just on paper it was these two entities, one for manufacturing and one for distribution. But taking a pause here on the history then, so right there we have that first mention of the Sega name. So what are your thoughts really on Sega's origins and how far we've really come from slot machines in the 1940s?
It's funny because like outlawing this kind of gave them Sega like, okay, we can't be complacent here, and made them grow. Because so if it wasn't for the military banning this, we probably maybe never had a Sega company that we know today. Also, the service games in 1960 is a good time to actually kind of like point to this and say, this is when Sega was born. Because if you think about it, like before this, it was kind of like, I don't know, it's weird because the name Service Games comes in 1960 as an official name, right? So that would be when Sega was Sega, brand-wise. Branding-wise. So, I think 60 is fine, but I don't know. Would you like to celebrate, like, would you be okay with Sega saying that the company, as it was founded, like, because like, if you say 60, that means the 15 years before that didn't really mean anything? Like, I've never heard any of these people being talked to about it's and Sega, like, I would love, these people are probably dead. That's the sad part, all these people. But it would have been, it would have been sick to, like, at least have a history page where their pictures are there and Sega as a company, says these people were the founders of the company.
I think it's just a source of Japanese, I don't know, I don't want to be like stubbornness or them being like, selfish, but it's just them saying this is how we, Sega as a company, started in 1960. Though it does kind of surprise me because I feel like a lot of companies, they want to have that history there. To say you're 75, at least here in America, means a lot more than to say you're like a 15-year-old company. Time means a lot. Like I eat like an oatmeal and the box will be like since 1743 and I'm like, holy crap, this must be good oatmeal,
Yeah.
But you never see oatmeal going since 2019 oatmeal has been made by our daddies and and that's it.
And
Sega of America or anyone really could claim the 75. In fact, well, I won't ruin it, but we will get to a point where Sega of America, I think, or Japan kind of goofed at their own anniversary. But yeah, it was surprising when Go Sega and that whole Sega 60th thing started because 1960 was not something we Sega fans ever really thought about. It wasn't thrown around until they actually celebrated the anniversary last year. And that was fun. It was a lot of fun. It's just, I don't know, why not 75?
So, like, I have a question for you before we move on, because I don't know, we're talking about Nintendo, but Nintendo's been a company for 130 plus years, right? And they used to make cards. Right. And they used to be under a different name, right? But they count that as their history. So it's just kind of weird to me. Sega is more, it's always been coin-operated machines the whole time, you know what I mean? Right. So that's crazy to me.
Right.
Do you think that, like, Nintendo should count the years they were making cards under a different name?
I mean, they're free to. I think it makes sense to. A lot of companies do that. That's why I'm kind of surprised that, and this wasn't just a Japan thing because there was a Go Sega American logo, which was again, we'll get to it, the American blue, and it was on the Sonic the Hedgehog toys and other things. So it's not like it was just a Japan-only thing, but I guess they just really looked to that 1960s event. And just to go into that a little more, in my research, I was getting a little confused because, like I said, it split into two like entities, but they were both under the same company, I guess. So this Nihon Goraku Busan, named Udamatic Inc., they actually became a major player in the jukebox scene. So remember, we were talking about slot machines. Now it's jukeboxes, to the point where they were manufacturing their own machines. And this is where they decided to start slapping the Sega brand name on their machines. And 1960 wasn't the first time Sega appeared on machines. I think maybe a few years earlier, but still the Sega 1000 jukebox, which you can see here, is a big source of pride to them, and it's cool. You know, I mean, it sits in the lobby, I believe, at the Sega of Japan headquarters. So they definitely love this thing. I'm sure they were all over the place at the time.
So for people that are like listening to it, the machine kind of looks like has red, kind of like it looks like it's made out of wood, and it's like sitting on top of those like things that old people use to walk around.
It does look like a walker.
Yeah, like a walker, like it's sitting on top of a walker. It looks pretty cool. It's a white Sega logo, not like the one we know, and it says Sega 1000. What does it say right there in the red?
I think it says something like stars.
Yeah, I think so too.
Or something.
And like the
Sega 1000
and like
stars.
the hits on top right there. Look at that, Nirvana. Is that no? I'm joking around. It's that old.
But it's cool. It's a cool little machine. I think though that I could be wrong, but there is something called the Mini Sega.
Yeah,
let me see
like
what year that was from. Yeah, so Mini Sega was actually a slot machine manufactured by Sega during the late 50s and early 60s. And so I think as early as 1958, they were putting out a machine with Sega on it. But, you know, the Jukebox, I think, is a really fun showcase, probably a lot more fun than a little slot machine. And basically, that's the story of Sega's origins as a name. And I do want to do a future show where we kind of cover a broad history of Sega, touch on this, and then move forward to that Gulf Western era and all that wild stuff. But I did want to point out, you know, David Rosen, he is a name that a lot of, I think, more hardcore Sega fans know. It's thrown around a lot when Sega history is brought up. He, I think, is still alive. I'm not sure. I know he was as of a few years ago. And so his story, very briefly here, is in 1954, he was a former Korean war vet, American businessman working in Japan, and he established a company called Rosen Enterprises, Inc. And he saw great success in importing photo booths from America to Japan, and eventually manufactured his own electromechanical arcade machines with assistance from Nihon Garaku Busan. And eventually these two companies merged, with Bromley bringing the Sega and Rosen bringing the Enterprises Inc. to form Sega Enterprises Inc. in 1965. So, you know, it's even more confusing now. So 1933, 1934, 1950, 1965. So pick one. You know, like, what do you...
I guess...
I don't know.
Brand-wise, 60... I mean, the name Sega, like, service games, if that's what it means, 60 is a good start. 65, officially the Sega logo. So, I guess you could always make a name when the name Sega first was stamped on an actual product. But then, didn't you say they were... Before the Jukebox already had one, too?
Right. So, I mean, 1958, the name was being put on machines. 1960, that company with Sega as their little trade name appeared. And then 1965, officially Sega Enterprises, which we still saw up to, gosh, I want to say like the 2000s on like machines and stuff. So, you know, it's hard to say. But there is one year that is completely wrong. And Sega actually used it not too long ago. If you bring up Sega Heritage, this is a failed line of re-releases that was following the Dreamcast collection. If you remember that, they released some really awesome ports of Space Channel 5 Part 2, which was Dreamcast, Jet Set Radio, Dreamcast, and then Nights into Dreams, which was Saturn. So clearly it can't be a Dreamcast collection anymore. So they called it Sega Heritage. Sounds cool, but on the logo they put established 1951. And
where did they get that from?
I don't know. And so I did my own research. There's also a Sonic Retro article that is really angry about this. Sonic Retro, let me tell you guys, like, they're so funny because they have people that have been writing, or not writing, but working on that site for years. But when something comes up that really angers them or like excites them, someone, it's like, will come out of the woodwork and like post a big article, and you're like, who the hell's that person?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And this was one of them. I'm like, wow, someone really cares about this. But I presume this is the person that's been writing a lot of the Sega history wiki pages, because so basically, you know, we talked about that 1960 date, but some years back, Sega attempted, like I said, to re-release those Sega Heritage games. Sonic Retro basically surmises that Sega was either using the date that Service Games was forced to stop business in Hawaii due to the ban and have employees travel in 1951. But regardless, that's kind of a stupid year to claim that you were established, like basically saying, like, oh, when was your business established? Well, we hit some legal issues and we sent some guys on a trip to Japan. And you're like, there's nothing established about, you know, like that's, if anything, that's like the year that we got screwed over by the U.S. government, you know?
I feel like maybe they were like, this is the earliest date that includes Japan, so this is the earliest date we could use for this Heritage logo. I'm assuming the person wanted to make this as old as possible. Might as well just went all the way back to like 1933 if that was the case, right?
Right. Bromberg. Who doesn't love Bromberg Company?
Everybody remembers Bromberg.
I still play my Bromberg.
My great-grandpa talks
there.
My great-grandpa talks to me about it all the time.
Sega was best when Bromberg was in charge. He made the best electromechanical games. There was one called Cowboy, and he'd shoot an Indian. Grandpa, you can't say that. What? Shoot? You can't say shoot anymore? You snowflakes. So anyway, talk about logos. All right, we're going to do that. So with all that history in our heads, we can now have a better understanding of the Sega logo. So kicking things off, let's take a look at the Service Games logo here.
Very simple.
Beautiful. So the Service Games logo, this appeared in 1945 and was mostly on print ads and the sides of slot machines. The primary color, it was black, and it was a basic italic serif font with cursive lettering. And if you're wondering, I mean, it's kind of serif. Maybe I'm misspeaking there.
What's that mean? It's like for people like me that don't know.
Serifs are those little lines that appear. So like Times New Roman, I guess I could say, like has those little lines, those little extra little lines on the tops and bottoms. This kind of has it, but I'd say it's more of like a cursive lettering. What I think is really weird though about the Service Games logo is that it should connect. Like like if you just squish the letters together a little bit, it would flow. Like the A would go into the M, go into the E. And typically when I'm doing a project and like working with these types of fonts, I'll squish it together a little so that it will flow a little bit more and look like cursive.
This is before they had graphic design.
Right. So, well, this was before they had computers. So a lot of this stuff was done by hand. Mm-hmm. They would use things like, I guess, like transfer rubbings. So they would have all these different sizes of lettering. I don't even want to think about it. It gives me a headache. It's an industry I would not be working in if we couldn't use computers, because it just sounds like, you know, roll up your sleeves. We're going to make a logo and you got to get out like all these crazy tools and shit. Yeah. So, I mean, it is what it is. I think the S, I guess, is kind of interesting looking, but to be quite honest, I think this is a very boring logo. It could say just about anything, like Sam's Sausages, or, you know, like
kind of looks like
it doesn't scream anything to me.
It kind of looks like it says Set Vice Games. It
kind of does. Yeah. The G looks a little goofy too, doesn't it? It looks like a
pie
someone
symbol.
Wrote. Yeah. Thankfully, you know, we moved past this and we got the red Sega logo that you can see here.
The Nintendo logo.
Yeah, right? So this one's interesting because this one came about in 1954. It was really the first instance of a Sega logo, but of course it's not the Sega logo. You see it in red here, but to be quite honest, it wasn't always red. It has these uppercase letters. It's kind of described as Gothic, meaning it has fluidity, angles, disproportionate thinness. So if you look at the E and the G, it's almost like someone had a marker, but like a flat like an elongated marker, so that if you kept it at an angle the whole time, you would get these little kind of like thin parts and thick parts. And there are a lot of designers now who still do like hand-drawn logos, and they look really pretty. They actually kind of look like this. I would not be surprised if someone hand drew this. It definitely is not a font that I'm aware of. And I think I actually really like this. It's dated though, so I could totally see why they moved past it. What do you think of this logo?
I guess it makes sense at the time. I like you said, I like the marker idea behind it, and you got to understand this is like before we even had a concept of what Sega was. So like, this would probably be our first exposure to the company. And I think it's a pretty good shot at a first logo. I like how you put it here that it's very gothic. So like, if I read your notes without your feedback, I'd be like, just reading your notes, I'd be like, it's very depressing. Obviously, it's gothic, but I didn't know that's what gothic meant when you said that. So I think it flows fine.
It almost has a medieval feel. Like if you would see, just like take one of these letters, like the G or the A, and put it on a large banner outside a castle, like it would totally fit. You see it here in red. It wasn't always red. I have put together a collection of examples here, so you can see if for example the machine used yellow and green, they would use yellow or green for the logo rather than the red. They would also do a thing where they kind of squish it a little bit. It's not always the same size. Like I show a picture of punching bag here. It's squished and has a red outline. I mean, that's fine. That works. I think honestly, it's probably coming down to the way that glass marquees were made, or the plexiglass marquees were made, because they probably had a limited amount of ink that they could use. So if you're doing like 3 colors, black, yellow, and green, you're not going to throw in red because it's probably going to either cost more or, I've been a graphic designer for 15 years, but I have not been a graphic designer for 75 years.
Yeah,
so, my knowledge, I have knowledge of the past, but it's limited because I've never been a practitioner of screen printing.
I will say,
or things like that.
This logo, like if you see it from far away, you can tell it's a Sega logo, so that's a good thing, because that's like kind of what your logo wants to be, right? When you're in an arcade.
Absolutely. And if you compare it to the modern Sega logo, it's a little more square. Like it's almost as tall as it is wide, which is kind of nice because it really fills a space. And if you look at the bottom, there is Sega Enterprises LTD, so you can see that they had like a secondary font that went with it, but it's kind of like, I don't really know what to say. It's like a different sort of script. Again, I think that was all hand drawn. I don't think this was like from some font library that they pulled. So, it is interesting. We also have one for punching bag. And I've seen this one referred to as like, people were saying, like on Sonic Retro or Sega Retro, they were like other logo examples. Now I think this only appeared a few times. Honestly, I think it's just another, I wouldn't call this a different logo so much as just a different treatment of the name Sega, where it kind of fits in with the more fun, gamey kind of side of things. So like, you see here, there's a little sticker that says Sega Game of Skill, and it's the one we've been discussing. But then on this gauge, it says Sega Punching Bag, but the Sega's a little wacky. I think it's just like, that's all it is. They were just like, we don't want to use this very gothic-looking logo when it's like a goofy, fun punching game. You know what I mean? That's all it is.
Yeah. That's
all it is. You'll see this from time to time. Like in modern Sega, there will be like Sega Sports, I think, doesn't use the Sega logo.
No, it uses like a blocky.
But it does say Sega. Yeah, but that's the Sega Sports logo.
Yeah.
That's not the Sega logo. And in this case, I'm going to just say this is like the Sega punching bag logo. It's not a new Sega logo. It's weird. Logos are weird. And then at this next one, Oh, do you see it?
Yeah, I see it. The yellow, the
What is-
red, and white.
But what is this logo?
This is the logo we all love today. The Sega two-striped logo. Is that what it's officially called? Two stripes, right? Or what's it called?
They call it Two-Stripe Billy. No, I don't know what they call it. Well, around 1976, Sega adopted its now classic design. However, contrary to popular belief, the logo of 1976 is not the logo we know now. And so this is where things get really interesting, at least for me as a designer. There's a few things I really want to point out. So there's no clear standard color. It really seems like black is the go-to a lot of the times. But then as you can see here, there's a red one with the white piping. There's a yellow one. There's a white one. So they really carried over the rules that they were applying to the previous Sega logo, where it was like, pick the color that works. And I guess that works for them, but moving into the 80s, 90s, 2000s, very rarely is there a logo that's like, oh, it's whatever color you want it to be. Like, you never see the McDonald's M now as anything other than yellow
and red.
Yeah. They would never be like, oh, you can make it blue if you want. In fact, that's like a big deal because there is...
branding outlines, right?
There's not only brand outline, but there's like brand rules. Like, you cannot change it or the marketing team is going to come down on you. But there is a rare exception where there is a McDonald's with, I believe, a turquoise M because it exists in a community where all the signage needs to be turquoise or black. And so they were like, all right, we'll make a turquoise M. So isn't that weird?
Yeah, that's weird.
I think they were like, we don't want like Starbucks coming in or McDonald's coming in and messing up our signage. So it's bizarre, but it is what it is. Another thing with this logo, I think the big difference is the A. If you look at the A is much wider than any of the other letters. Also, the A is kind of open. So and I keep describing this, but honestly, I feel like this is an episode you really need to watch because we're looking at a lot of things. But the A, so it swoops up, it swoops down, making the triangle, and then it goes, but it stops short of connecting or overlapping with the other side going down, which is not something we see today. Also, the G, this G was actually custom made for the Sega logo, as well as the E, which has been changed a little bit. And you're asking, well, what was custom made? So Sega's logo actually comes from a typeface, or I should say a font family called Yagi. And we should take a look at the Yagi Double here. Yagi Double, it sounds like a drink.
So
you'd order the Yagi Double.
So Sega made this font, and then this other company came and copied, as we were telling me right here, right? Yagi Double just like copied Sega, right?
Mm-mm.
CNN copied Sega.
Yagi Double. No, Yagi Double existed. Okay. Yagi was a font family. It was designed actually by, I believe, a Japanese man. I mean, if the name is to be believed, it's Teruoki Yagi.
Okay.
And it was released on Robert Trogman's Photostar label. So fonts had labels, kind of like artists had labels. And they still do to this day. There's things called font houses. So people will design fonts and either sell them to the font house, or I think they'll develop them internally, and then they will be licensed out. Of course, nowadays, like anything goes with fonts. It seems like I've used all sorts of fonts, probably illegally. But only
every font.
But legal. I will say, only like as my little like weird side projects. Never once when I've worked for a company has it been okay to use whatever font you want. A lot of the times, you'll have a collection of fonts that are approved to use. So. It sounds lame, but it's actually the most exciting thing for me when I go to a new company and I have new fonts to work with, because I actually will get sick of certain fonts. And so to like go somewhere else and be like, oh, no more Universe, or whatever it is, no more Times New Roman.
Do you think these guys like that create fonts and make them and they license them out, like this font, you think they make a lot of money like from licensing alone?
I don't think so. I don't think because typically it's a one-time license, so they probably paid the fee to use the font family, or they made enough changes to it to make it their own typeface, or not their own typeface, but their own logo, which was then trademark, copyright, registered trademark, whatever. So, that's pretty much it. In fact, if you go to like Sega's, let me see, I'll go to sega.com right now. Great site if you've never been there.
I heard it's good.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a registered trademark up there right now. So, it is what it is. Now, when we're looking at this, then you can see, like when you're looking at Yagi Double, and there are other Yagis, if you ever want to look at them, you can see some Sega things here. So look at the S. That's the Sega S. Look at the E. That's the Sega E. It might be a little bit different, like with the widths of the E's, or the little lines, but it is. The A is there, so very clearly the A. But where's the Sega G? Do you see it?
No, that's a totally different G, and that's how you
exactly
don't pay for fonts. Thank you.
Maybe, I don't know, but that's definitely where they kind of stamped their unique footprint. And made the Sega logo we know and love. The problem is, I don't know who made that G. Who made the G? I don't know. Someone did.
Somebody forgot it.
Unfortunately, yeah, no one talks about who, if it was like an external agency, someone internal. But, that you can see it right here. The Sega logo exists within the Yagi Double family, and Sega did a little zhuzhing on their own and made the logo we know and love, or is it? Because let's take a look at the next slide here. And this will show us, these are examples of Yagi Double. Are we seeing those?
Yeah. I'm looking at it.
Yeah, so this gives you an idea of how often it's been used. Like
what I'm seeing,
Tom Jones.
What I'm seeing is like a very like 70s hippie font, right?
Absolutely. There is a porno that uses it. It recently came out on Blu-ray, I think. And
you bought it.
God, I can't remember what it's called. I almost did, because it uses the Sega logo, not only on the poster, but within the movie itself. Not the Sega logo, the Yagi Double font. And so it's just kind of funny. And I'll see people do this. They'll be like, I drove past a restaurant that has the Afterburner font. And I'm like, well, it's not the Afterburner font. Afterburner used... You know what I mean? Like all of these Sega arcade games, or at least a lot of them, would use an existing typeface or font. So don't get too excited. And I'm going to embarrass myself here, because I believe font family has typefaces within it. I think that's the distinction. This is what years of just like doing the drop down and not really paying attention to things does to me. Like I forget very basic graphic design terms.
Yeah.
But in any case, yeah, so there you go. So moving on to this next one, this is where, to me, you really see the Sega logo we know and love. And look at, isn't this, so it's beautiful, isn't it?
The outline white, the baby blue. This is how you do it.
This is how you do it. And you'll notice here now the A, it is the same width of the other letters, so it feels more uniform. There's this really fun little playful thing where the A butts up against the G and touches it and overlaps. And also that little bit there closes in, so now there's a triangle within the A, and it's smaller too. I don't know if you're able to jump back.
I did. It's just a show.
To that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
It looks more...
It's subtle, but it does so much.
It's not only that. I think the white outline also kind of helps to make it all feel cohesive, Like, yeah. Yeah, that A, definitely. You're right about the A. I wonder who thought about it. Like, they were just, like, moving it just a little bit, and they're like, here's your money, good job. Right?
Well, that's the thing, though. I mean, working in graphic design, I don't do So here, let me just give a very, very brief, like, what I do. So I'm not making logos all the time. More often than not, I'll go to a place and the logo already exists. If I am making a logo, it's like for an initiative or a small group or like an HR thing where they're like, oh, we want people to take care of themselves, so make a health logo. But I think the most prominent logo I was able to design was for Aramark, specifically their in-company marketing team. So Aramark, they do a lot of food service for like sporting events. It's a name you don't really know until you start noticing the trucks or seeing like the little logos when you're at like a baseball game. And they had a internal agency that would do marketing for companies, like putting the names up on like the hot dog. You know, like you're looking at what hot dog you want to buy, and then all of a sudden it'll show you an ad for like Verizon.
Oh, okay.
And that's what they were responsible for. And it was actually one of the first things I did. It was I was doing a internship at a design agency or a marketing agency, and they were like, make one. And they picked it. And I checked as of like 10 years ago, they were still using it. I think it's changed since then, but that's the example of me making a logo from scratch and it carrying forward.
So how much money do you get for royalties for that logo?
Nothing. I was working. I was an unpaid intern.
I know. That's what sucks about the whole
thing.
They
gave me, I think they gave me a stipend for food, which was $100 a week, which is nothing. So yeah, that was fun. But I do, you know, like I do a lot of layouts. I do a lot of print stuff, web stuff. You know, being a graphic designer though is not always flashy, and it's not always designing beautiful logos. So when you get to either do something like this or analyze something like this, like I've been able to do for the past week, you start to get excited about things like the A getting a little squishier or the triangle being smaller. Yeah, so like I mentioned in that little analysis, they closed the A, the triangle formed. I am just checking my notes here. There's also the white stroke. And it began to appear in that iconic blue. And then the piping's a little thinner too. So the little line inside's a little thinner. So at this point, every single one of these letters are unique to the Sega logo. They are based on Yagi Double, but if you download Yagi Double and type this out, it will not look like this. You would have to do a lot of work to change it. And I honestly think the reason why this happened in 1982, 1983 was because the Sega System 1 arcade board was coming out, the SG-1000 was coming out, and there was also a lot of internal shuffling to make the Sega brand prominent. And a little example of this is, well, here, first off, let's look at some Sega examples here. So you can see right there, the SG-1000 has the logo we've been discussing slapped right on it. And I think that might have been kind of what got them to reassess their logo and really decide on something, because they're like, look, this is our first consumer video game console. We're putting this logo on here. Let's do a little work and finesse and refine it and decide on a color. I always found it interesting, though, that despite being a Japanese machine, it does use a darker blue, which has since been associated with the West. Mm-hmm. So there's that, but they still use it in different colors. There's a red Sega logo that you can see here, and then, of course, the blue we all know and love. But around the same time, too, there was a company called Gremlin Industries Incorporated, and just a brief history on them. They were an American arcade developer and manufacturer that was purchased by Sega in 1978. And with the purchase came several name changes. So they were first called Gremlin Sega, then Sega Gremlin, and then Sega Electronics. And Gremlin also became Sega's largest consumer-facing company, meaning most Americans are probably thinking of Gremlin when it comes to Sega's earliest American endeavors. So games like Monaco GP, Zaxxon, Congo Bongo, and Buck Rogers are all Gremlin games that Sega just kind of happened to acquire and then develop over time with Gremlin overseeing it. I would love to do a Gremlin episode of Sega Talk someday because it's an interesting history there. But as for the logo, Sega Gremlin was unique in that they used an unmodified Yagi double. And it really wasn't until the name change in 1983 to Sega Electronics that they switched over to what we see now as the Sega logo. And interestingly, this all took place around the same time, as I mentioned, that logo change came about. Actually, I don't think I ever made a Gremlins image. So I apologize. But it's basically the Yagi logo, or the Yagi typeface, but typed out Sega, so it's that other weird G. So it's like why do you think, do you think it was just like no one really cared that it got unchecked for so long? Like, you've got your American subsidiary using your logo, but it's not your logo. It's weird, right?
Yeah,
like, it's sloppy.
I have to agree. I do wonder, like, how much of a wild west it was. Like, I bet you anything that Sega Japan's like, we're doing this, and Gremlin's doing their own thing, and I don't feel like they were that connected considering everything. And like, I don't know. What do you think about the Gremlin name? I mean, I understand that like the movie by Steven Spielberg was really good, but like, do you really have to name the whole company after that?
I think Gremlin is a strange name for a arcade company because the notion of a gremlin is something that gets into like machinery and causes it to break and malfunction. Like the whole story of Gremlins taking apart World War II planes while they were flying, like, it's a scary thing. So it's kind of weird, or maybe it's a little tongue in cheek to be like, Gremlin, like, here's your arcade machine. There's a gremlin. You might break it. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's goofy, but yeah, there are some places where it's just a Wild West. A place I worked at one time, it bothered me because I would walk around and again I would see examples of people misusing the logo or using old logos or branding, and I was like, can we do something about this? And it was just a budgetary thing. Like, it was like, nah, like, we're not going to print up a new sign. Just keep it up there. But if you let that slip, you see what happens here with Sega, where you have companies going unchecked for years using either wrong colors, wrong logos, or in some cases, like, using like brand campaigns longer than they should, or pulling like old language, or it's just it can be very sloppy. And I think Sega's really tightened it down now. But there was a time where even just typing out Sega was all over the place. Like, it's capital S, lowercase EGA, but it's like, that doesn't really make sense because Sega's not a word. It's a logo that's all capital letters.
It's also two words.
And I feel like... Yeah, it's like two words, so either have it be uppercase S, lowercase e, uppercase G, lowercase a, or all. I mean, Sega Bits is, we know full well, people type us up wrong all the time. It's really SEGA, uppercase, BITS, lowercase, no space. That's it. But people get it wrong all the time, so I'm always kind of fearing when I'm like, oh, we're going to appear in a major publication, and then it's like, the fine folks at the Sega Bits website. And I'm like, okay.
When they get it right, I'm actually kind of shocked.
I know, right? I know. So let's talk about the color blue.
Oh.
You feeling blue? I'm feeling blue.
Always feeling blue.
When people think of the Sega logo, they think blue. But which blue? There are two blues.
Baby blue. It's better. It's just nicer.
Baby blue and daddy blue. So as you can see or hear here, I'm going to read off hexadecimal numbers, and maybe you can see the colors in your head.
Of course.
Sega's logo color was never 100% accurate. Sometimes the color would suit the arcade machine. Other times they'd try to stick to blue, but just use like any blue they wanted to use. As a longtime designer, I can tell you this happens a lot when logos go unchecked. I've worked at places with green logos, and people would just use any green, but it's not the right green. I honestly think this is what has caused the discrepancy where people think that the Dreamcast logo was orange in Japan, red in America, and blue in Europe. That's wrong. The Dreamcast logo in America and Japan is the same color. How do I know this? I own two consoles. I've compared the physical console, and I've taken screen captures of the American and Japanese startup screens. I dropped it in Photoshop. It's the exact same color. So people are crazy. Don't listen to them.
Doesn't the color kind of affect the blue? Also affect how it's printed, and depending on like what kind of printer you use.
That's right. So you will have images in RGB or CMYK file formats. You'll have people using the hexadecimal code, which is meant for web use and screen use, in print, and then it'll translate poorly. Right now, I actually, at the place I'm working, we have a new blue, but the blue is only meant for web. We don't have a blue for print yet. And I just recently worked on a piece that was supposed to be digital, and then they told us it's going to be printed, and we're like, all right, good luck, because the blue we use does not exist for print yet. And it's so confusing, and I feel for people, because I'll get people angry at me online when I'm like, actually, it's the same color for America and Japan for the Dreamcast. Like, no, it's orange or it's red, and I'm like, it's an orangish red. Not every color is like one thing. It's not like we have 7 colors in the entire world.
And then
and
then they'll dig through like the Google images and find this like really low pixelated image of some logo from a game. That and then they're like, you're wrong, and it's like, cool, dude.
And the thing is, and again, just using Dreamcast as an example, there are people who scan in a printed manual and then they put it up online and they point to that, but it's like, well, that's a printed thing scanned into a computer. I mean, right here, I'm holding a thing of hand cream.
Uh-oh.
This is a weird color. It's not green. It's not blue. It's like a seafoam color. Now, you could see this and then like see it online and be like, oh, it looks a little more green. And then you'd have 2 people, the one who says, oh, it's like a bluish green seafoam kind of thing. And another guy going, no, that hand cream has always been green, bro. You don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, I don't know. Like, I guess lesson is get your head out of your butt.
I will say,
end of the day. Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was going to say about
go
the
ahead.
blues, like,
angry.
at least these 2 blues, like, they're pretty close. Like, even if you saw these, like, let's say you're a kid and you played a game and then you played a different game, you probably would have noticed the difference in the blues. They're, like, pretty close.
Right.
Close enough that the branding will continue to stick the same. It's a blue Sega logo. At least.
Right. So these are RGB hexadecimal codes. You'll see these, like, when you are doing like a online web page designer and you have the little color picker and you can like copy paste these little codes. So in Japan, it's 008 DD0. And then in international markets, including America, it's 006 0A8. And that's what gets you these 2 colors. And yeah, absolutely. These colors, they'll be kind of not interchangeable, but you will most definitely boot up a Dreamcast game in America and see a light blue Sega sometimes, either because it's like baked into the game's like startup screen, or like it's, I don't know, like a graphic on a billboard and they didn't go ahead and like replace the color. And that's not a problem. It's not a big deal. The thing is, though, it's unknown why they did this. It's believed that maybe Sega of America thought a darker blue better suited their market, or it could have just been like a mistake and they ran with it and eventually were like, we're the dark blue. In Japan, however, it's speculated that they chose this because it's more child-friendly. And to me, it makes sense because Japan, I feel like, always did a lot more research in the Sega logo, because if you remember, there was that amazing Sega startup jingle and imagery, and there's a whole video that accompanies this where it's like, isn't it Nagoshi like looking at pictures on a wall, and he's like, for my whole life I have dreamed of people's eyes and looking at, and you're just like, holy crap, dude, you really overthought this.
Oh yeah, he sold it.
He did, and so it's a 3-second video. Let's just check it out.
Let me put it. No, sorry, I was gonna put it on right now. Sorry, my bad. It's just I don't even have it in the window. I'm trying to copy this thing. It's weird.
Oh, no problem.
It's giving me trouble on the Google. But yeah, I remember when he did that whole like video where he like, you know what? A lot of us online thought that they were gonna do some eye tracking technology or something. and they never did. So that was super.
No.
That was super weird. Like that, nothing came out of this because they always felt like when they were teasing this that something bigger was gonna happen. But let me play it. Wow. So people that have already seen our streams, I guess. I mean, or seen the new logo. It's basically a night ball with the Sega logo coming off of it, and it's supposed to like simulate like excitement in the eyes because supposedly when someone's excited, the eye changes. You know, you could tell people's
the eye,
emotions.
dilates.
So they're trying to be artsy.
So and so in this case, this is not so much a logo as it is an application of the logo. So I didn't really touch on that in this because we could go down a rabbit hole and talk for a whole other hour about Sega or about the 2000s Sega. You know, remember that one?
Yes.
And so in this case, I think this is just the new Sega. And I like it a lot more. I really like that the way they've been applying this is that game trailers will start with a black screen almost, and you'll hear this sound, but you won't see the Sega logo until the end where they show the eye. So they play it twice to bookend things. And it really makes the sound almost be the logo. Like it's like a sound version of
the logo.
The logo presentation. Yeah, exactly. Which is no different from Sega or Sega.
You know, like they all have their own needs. Like Sega, when they did the whole Sega saying it, it made a lot of sense considering that nobody's ever heard of this word before at the time.
Right.
And now that they've become so iconic or iconic enough in video games that they could just do it with the jingle, like you said.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, looking back at the logo here, I did mention there's a white outline. This really just appears when the logo is on a colored background. It doesn't always have to be there. And in fact, I think it might always be there, but you don't see it because it's on a white background, or at least I think a lot of the times when they're giving the logo out to people for use or it's being used internally for pieces or whatever, I think they're just like, well, we have a version without the white outline, but you can't see the white outline when it's on white. So what's the, the point? It's not always there, but there. It's strange because to me, I don't think about it until I talk about it. And then I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. The white outline isn't always there, but it always felt like it should be there. It's strange. Also, I found this is what I thought was really, at least for me as a designer, I thought this was really interesting. The sizes. So there is an alternate version or two alternate versions of the logo here. This,
what
I believe, was used in Sega Europe.
Ugh.
So
Europeans, what are you guys doing? Why are you guys changing it?
It's strange. So the one on the left has a thicker like piping, and then the one on the right has smaller piping. But I also noticed that the little triangle in the A is larger than usual. And I think this logo is meant for very small usage, because if you look at the next slide here, you can see they're very tiny, but clearly the one on the left reads a lot better at a smaller size because the piping is a little thicker.
Oh, yeah.
So it's interesting. I don't think it's necessary. I have not seen this happen typically with logos where they're like, this is our tiny version.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they do this anymore, but I just thought this was a weird little thing that I guess was in the European style guide. Like, and to be honest, like when you're dealing with logos, like if you start putting rules like this in place, it's great and all. It's a cool little way to solve the problem of the logo being really tiny, but you're not going to get people to come on board and be like, oh, okay, so I need to measure 7 millimeters, and if it's less than 7, I need to dig out this other logo. Like, I don't know. It seems like a lot of extra work.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, I always thought the Sega logo was probably one of the better logos for being so far, like a far away logo, you know? Compared to Nintendo, where like it's so long, and then when you shrink it, it gets even tinier. It's ridiculous, but yeah.
Nintendo should change their name to like Nindo. Nindo.
Or the fans will go crazy. They can't ever change it.
So this wraps up our history lesson on Sega logos. We're not done yet. There's a few things I want to cover after this, but here is the test. Are you ready to take a test?
All right.
All right, so let's throw this up here. So these are 4 logos. One of these is the official Sega logo. The other ones are not. So let's go through here. So the upper left-hand corner, is that the official Sega logo, George?
No. Look at the A. It doesn't connect.
No. That's right. The one in the upper right.
That's definitely not the Sega logo. It looks like you made this line. You just...
No, these are from... Well, I'll tell you.
Okay, but that's not the official.
Okay, lower left-hand corner. This is a tricky one.
This is a tricky one. No, I think... actually. I'm looking at them closely. I think the last one is the actual logo. The one on the bottom
the lower right?
Yeah.
All right, let's see if you're right. Let's go to the next slide here.
All right.
You're right. So the reason is, so like you mentioned, that's a great eye. So the upper left-hand corner, the triangle is too big in the A, but it does connect. But the A doesn't connect to the G. And this was from someone on DeviantArt who I believe remade the Sega logo. I don't know how much work they did because they could have very easily just like downloaded a Sega font and typed it out, which I think is what they did. Because if you're going to do something like that, you need to, again, zhuzh it up a little bit and like move that G and the A together. The upper right-hand corner is just, that's someone on DeviantArt trying and just spectacularly failing. Lower left is interesting because if you look where that little bit where the triangle connects on the A, there's like a weird little white space where the two blues intersect. Do you see that? Yeah. It's very slight. I see that a lot online, and I think it is a byproduct of the way the logo is drawn and then converted. I think it's not allowing the two blues to overlap. It almost finds like a negative space and shows a white. I don't know what causes that, but I don't think it's from an official Sega logo, but it's something that goofs up in the process, or it might be something that someone custom made and then it's just been, people would like lift it and do an article on like Gizmodo about the history of Sega, and they'd be using this logo they think's official, but I don't know. But good for you. You won. You get to take a Sega logo home.
All right. Woo.
Yeah. The last bits, I just had some interesting little things I want to talk about. So this one, Mr. Robot. So Mr. Robot's a show I know you really enjoy. I need to start watching it.
It's a pretty effed up show, but it's
is it over now?
Yeah, it's over. It's only like
good.
3 seasons, maybe. I want to say.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll watch it after I finish Sopranos for the 3rd time.
Yeah.
So back in 2015, I noticed the Mr. Robot logo all over the place. They were advertising it downtown where I was working, and I was like, "This is weird. This is the Sega logo. This isn't Yagi Double. This is the Sega logo." And so when I got home, I dug into it. So here's the original tweet,
but
and then I've
it
got
does have to
images.
do with Sega.
Well,
the show.
It does?
No, it doesn't. No.
No. So you can see here this first image. This is Sega replica font 2.5. So there's this dude. I think he might be Japanese. I think he definitely is. Who made all of these Sega logo fonts? Not just Sega, but like every single console, tons of games, even like the Pico. International version, so like the Saturn. And what they did was they took the logo and then expanded it and blew it out into its whole typeface. So they would make letters based on all the letters that were in these iconic logos. And these fonts have been used again and again and again by like fan sites like us, people online. These fonts must be over 20 years old now.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just second nature for me now to type in NI to auto-populate the whole Nisei or Nice, whatever it is, family of fonts. I love these, but it says very clearly here, please don't use this font for business and don't carry out secondary distribution. Now, it's questionable how much legal sway, like, you know, if a major corporation is going to use one of these, like, is this guy from over 20 years ago going to come out of the woodwork and sue them? Maybe. I mean, if I was the USA Network, I wouldn't risk it, because this is, you see things like this all the time. Like, what happened recently? Stranger Things at Target had Blu-rays released in VHS boxes, and Netflix just straight up searched VHS tape on Google Images, found the largest image, and used it. And it's it's a photo that a guy not only took but licensed, so they got hit with a potential lawsuit and had to pay this guy out under the table for the right to use his photo. So just imagine Mr. Robot's doing their thing, and then this dude comes out and he's like, hey, you're using my logo. And the reason I figured that out was that, obviously, you look at this, it's not the Yagi double. It is very clearly using the Nisei, which uses the Sega logo as the basis for a Sega logo font that is not anymore the Yagi double. And
they did make the spacing different, right?
Yeah, the only thing they did for Mr. Robot is they changed the B to connect the piping so that the B lines were enclosed, which kind of breaks the rule of how the Sega logo is drawn, but I understand why they did it, because the B looks like a 3. You know what I mean? Otherwise.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I don't think this is enough changing it to make it your own. And I think they could open themselves up to a lawsuit. It never happened, so whatever. But it's just a little word of warning. Like, you know, you're working at some major studio, and, oh, Mr. Robot, I'm going to use the Sega logo. I'm going to download the font. Like, think twice. Run it by your creative director, because you might get into legal troubles real fast.
I saw more people comparing this to the CNN logo, even though it really isn't, you know?
Right, yeah, CNN.
Because, the show has to do with mainstream media in parts of it, so that's why people were comparing it.
It's weird, because, the CNN logo, if you compare it to the Yagi double, it definitely is, but it isn't, because, well, there are connecting ends. There's 2 alternate ends. So I guess you'd be right, but the ends are almost overlapping. It's not 2 ends. It's like 1.5 ends.
Yeah. It kind of looks like
interesting.
I don't know, like an M instead of ends.
I don't know. Hey, a little fun fact, CNN headquarters, which is in Georgia, they are in the former location of the Sid and Marty Krofft HR Puff and Stuff theme park. And the only surviving remnant is the world's largest freestanding escalator, which takes you up into this globe. That's the CNN headquarters. Isn't that goofy?
That is pretty goofy.
That's the only fun fact I have in my head, and I always share it when I can. So, so I guess now it's time for a competition. So, being such an iconic logo, unchanged for decades, of course fans and budding graphic designers have tried to redesign or perfect the Sega logo. And so I thought we should review a handful in sort of a great British bake-off judging panel, and then we pick a winner.
You can't perfect perfect.
Don't spoil it, George. So first up, we have one by Richard Pierce of R&R Design. I don't know.
Hired.
So he says, my take on the Sega logo and an update to the brand logo lettering. Thoughts?
This looks like the old Sears logo.
It kind of does look like the Sears logo. To me, it looks like he took a pre-existing font with the E and S, the E, and the G, drew the piping in, and then made his own custom A, because there is, like, the A is not perfect. It goes up to the point and then kind of tips in a little bit. Not a fan. I'm sorry, Richard. Sorry.
No.
You're gonna go. I hope you look forward to seeing your wife and children because you're going home to them now. Goodbye.
Bye.
Hang your apron up, sir. This next one, this is a weird one. So French design firm SYN decided to take a swing at sprucing the company's image up. The thinking behind the United stems from the fact that Sega, like so many Japanese publishers, does a lot more than just publishing games for home consoles and handhelds. Now, this logo is interesting because it was from a larger article. I think it might have been Kotaku, like Australia or something. But they've since taken the article down and all the images are missing, and the only way the images show up is Google image search. But this SYN design firm, they went all out. There's not just this logo, but there's the whole process to how they got there. It's crazy.
Right.
What do you think?
You know what? This is better than the last one. I like the idea, what they're coming up with. This kind of reminds me of like an anniversary logo or something like that, that Sega would do, where they would be like, this is all our companies together, our amusement machines, right. And our video game companies. But,
right.
I mean, would you want this to be the official logo? It's too, like, if you shrink this down on a video game packaging, it would be a mess.
Absolutely.
And the white is too thick. It's just like thick Sega white font. Like, you want to see the actual Sega font right there over United. And it should be more of a kind of like a Sega Heritage or something like that type of logo for an anniversary than anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. This feels like like you said, a treatment for like a special event or something internal maybe going on. Like, oh, we're celebrating all our teams. My problem with it is that there's a lot of things going on. It's like within a circle, and then there's these 4 shapes on top, which really don't tell me anything except for looking pretty. And then the Sega logo itself is the logo we know and love, but they removed the piping and made it smaller. And then they added this United, which either makes me think of a soccer team or an airline. And then on top of this, I get where they're coming from, but I've seen this happen time and time again where someone will like pitch an idea to a company and then not do their research on the company. So if I were SYN walking into the doors of Sega, they didn't do this, but imagine they did. And they're like, look, we want to present to you a redesign of your logo. At the end of the meeting, I would tell them as Sega, you do realize that we're Sega Sammy as the parent company, and you're treating Sega, the game maker and publisher, as the parent company, because they're saying, oh, Sega's more than just home consoles and handhelds. And that's true. That's Sega Sammy. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's almost like and this happens all the time. We get people going, oh, I think Microsoft's going to buy Sega. And I'm like, really? You think that? You think they're going to buy Sega Sammy? They're going to buy a resort business? They're going to buy an arcade? It's like, I don't blame people for not doing their research, but like they came at this all wrong. And also it changes the name of the company pretty much. Like, what are they called now? Sega United? That's weird.
I guess so. And not only that, like the font, what they, sometimes when I do Photoshop, it's like they took the Sega font, that you would type up, but then you did the font white because you got too lazy to change the color. And then when you did the outline white, it just became that. And they just went,
it is kind
all right,
like
that's
that.
good enough.
That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oops. Yeah. And then so here we've got that going on. And then the next one we have is from Edwin Martinez.
Yeah. Well, I feel like everyone is like very influenced, obviously, by the double, Sega original logo, and they just want to like make it worse. Like that's like their job. The G looks like the Capsule Corps or something from Dragon Ball Z.
I see that.
But yeah, I don't really like this. I don't like how circle it is, and then it's randomly square. Then it's like the S. It's like different shapes. I guess that's what they're trying to go for. Instead of being one united shape like Sega, with the swirling, I guess. Because like the S and the G and the E, they're totally different shapes and feels. I mean, I don't want to show my hand, but I will say of the 3 we've seen so far, this is the strongest one. Just because it retains at least the Sega S, which I think is very iconic. The E is
is different. It's squared off. The G is completely different. I'm not a big fan of the G. It looks like a copyright logo, if anything. And then the A is unnecessarily different again. So it's like the first two letters, they have me and then they lose me with the G and the A. And it's almost like it's so close to the original that it's unnecessary. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the original's better.
Yeah, well, so far, yeah. And then moving on to this fourth one, we have this one. The other one was from WB Black Official. This one is from Edwin Martinez. I'm sorry. And
these two look a lot alike with the G.
Yeah, it's similar to the previous one. I don't like the E. I'll just come out and say that.
It looks like they were trying to go for like an arrow in between the E, G, A. So you could, like, it has that space. The A looks like a character from that one Among Us game. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, again, like you said, it's just copying the original Sega logo. So, I don't know, it's kind of weird. It's like nobody could come up with something totally original because it's so iconic, you know what I mean? And
right.
You see this and you're like, I'd rather have the original logo. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, if I were to take a stab at this, I would throw everything out the window. I wouldn't do the blue. I wouldn't do the piping. I wouldn't even try to emulate the existing logo. I'd try something completely different. If anything, I would not even show Sega, and I would try to make a icon or a shape that would be Sega. Because I think then you're moving into more of a what am I trying to say? Like, I don't know, you're at least thinking outside the box and trying something new. And they kind of do that with the Sega United, but I think those 4 little blocks are kind of cheap. I threw this out to Twitter and no one liked it. No one liked any 4 of them. They got really mad. They said the logo doesn't need a redesign. It's iconic. I see no reason to redesign it. Interestingly, someone pointed out that Sony tried to do this 4 decades ago, but their original is just too special to replace.
Isn't the Sony one just like a font? Like it's like a very like Sony logo. Let me look. Sony. I'm pretty sure it's just a font, right? Yeah, the Sony font. Like, I don't know. Like, do you think that's really that special?
I mean, it's iconic now.
Yeah, now. But I'm saying, like, I don't know. It just feels very, very, like, plain in a good way. I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm saying, like, I don't know. To never be able to change it ever, that's kind of weird. But maybe I'm just crazy. Maybe I'm not a Sony fan.
Right, but I mean, in the case of these, no one seems to like any of them. They say, what's the point? And I agree. I think we've reached a point now where Sega has been using the logo that it has for so long. And as evidence, they've been perfecting it since like the 1970s. So if anything, leave the redesigning to like your characters or your franchises. Like, that's where you can really make your mark. I don't think there's any need to change Sega because it has so many great things associated with it. And going back to people complaining about, I wish they'd still make consoles. I think there's people out there who sees the latest Yakuza game, and to just see that memorable, iconic Sega logo that's no different from the one on your Dreamcast does something. I think that's like a special thing to them to be like, well, it's not a Sega console, but there's the Sega logo I know and love. If they change it, I think it would definitely draw a line and say there was the Sega of old, and then here's the Sega of new. And I don't think people would like that. I think they'd hate it. So I'm going to say no winners, unfortunately. I'm sorry, you're all going to go home. But I will give a minor thumbs up to WB Black Official for at least understanding that the S works really well. So I'm glad they kept that.
I mean, I will say one thing about the Sega logo. Like, now the trend for companies has been to, like, make it flatter, to make it more simple. And I'm like, can you really make the Sega logo more simple, more flat? Like, it's already is what it is. Like, they've done it already. It's never been complicated. So, yeah. Why?
Well, we do here have some official alternatives that actually do exist. So this is called Sega Around the World. We have New Zealand. This was used for the Master System in New Zealand in 1983.
Disgusting.
It reminds me of some of those ones we looked at. It's weird.
It's so weird.
Chinese in the late 80s used in
It looks
Hong
a lot
Kong.
like. It kind of looks a lot like our logo, just in their font. But like, I don't know. I'm not Chinese. I don't know Chinese. I wonder what they would say it says.
Shiga. I don't know. And then Arabic.
Which you got
this one.
actually comments about this one when you posted it.
Yeah. It's like Seja, I think.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people going back and forth saying, oh, it's wrong. And it's like, no, phonetically, the G doesn't translate over, so you're using the right one, yada, yada.
Yuzo
I thought that
Koshiro
was-
even messaged us back about this one. He said it looked like a Pac-Man game?
Yeah, it looked like a maze game that he showed a screenshot from. So I really like that Yuzo Koshiro bit. And then a big announcement: we actually are forming a new team of writers in Arabic-speaking regions. It's going to be Sega Bits Arabia. So I have the logo here.
Oh, it looks actually really nice in that language.
I was told.
Yeah.
Well, I threw this up there initially on Twitter, but I think I did it in the wrong direction because they read from right to left. So I flipped it. So I think this says Seja Bit.
Okay. I like the little dots, like with the little thing. It looks nice. I like it.
Yeah. So good. I'm looking forward to what our writing team has to
talk about
talk
the
about.
history of Arabian countries and the Sega consoles.
Maybe, I don't know. We even reached out to our Patreon pals. I want to talk about them before we close things out. They shared their thoughts on if the Sega logo should be redesigned. Daniel Andres said only if it was slightly altered, then maybe. Other than that, no, of course not. There's no reason for them to. Hams said no, most certainly not. The logo is iconic as is. I think many companies would love to have such a well-designed and recognized logo. Alex Hughes says nah, it's fine the way it is.
I agree.
Ben Hayward says, I wonder what they could even possibly change it to. The big blue blocky letters have always been a bit of a retro feel for me, and since I've pretty much lost with any game that's beyond 8-bit, 16 is scratch, the logo style has always felt just right. Tyler Olu says, there's something special about that logo, and no matter if something came first, I recognize it as the Sega font. Yeah, see? And then finally, Nicholas Schaefer says it's iconic and should not be changed. So we've got a lot of Sega boys and girls who are just like putting their foot down. They will fight to the death.
They're
Sega
right
logo.
about it though. Like, what can you change it to? What could replace the Sega logo? Not that much things, but like, how about just the font that says Sega in like Arial? It's like, oh, that's just real quick, or Gothic font. Block text.
Well, I like the one. What was it? The EA logo. Remember that? I put that up. It was like SEGA, and they're like, "This is cursed. You can't make the Sega logo out of the EA logo."
So when Sega was in the console industry, it made sense for them to keep it blue because Nintendo was red, I guess, and they kind of adopted the opposite. Would you be against Sega like making custom logos for their like opening on games like they used to? Like maybe the Yakuza has leopard print as a Sega thing, or would
I
that
would
be
love
too
that.
much?
In fact, I really liked and I wish they kept it up longer, the Sega Pride logo, the rainbow one. I think that looks sick. And it's not even, I mean, I don't mean to say like, oh, and it's not even gay pride. It just looks cool. But it's one of the few times where a company changed their logo to rainbow colors and it did not scream like, oh, you can only use this for 1 month. Like when I saw that, I was like, keep this up all year. It looks cool. It's different,
Yeah.
I think I really wish they would send me one of those shirts. I guess I have to be like in the LGBTQ community to get one. I don't know.
They don't sell it or anything? Like you
No,
think they would sell it?
They were giving it away to people, but I think only to people who like, I guess were gay or less.
They should have sold it, and then all profits would have proceeded like a LBG. Yeah, I mean, you know what I mean. LGBTQ plus, or whatever, like a charity for them or
Right.
whatever. I don't know what charity, but like
that would have been cool. Yeah. Oh well. So finally, to end things, I wanted to touch on the way that Sega had, like you mentioned, the startup screen treatments. There's so many to count, and honestly, like, it's not a logo. It is showing the logo, but it's more than that. And so there's so much that we could cover. But I'll cut it short with just us sharing our favorites. So George, what is your favorite Sega logo?
I picked the Comic Zone one because it was the first time it was like super obviously, like, you could notice that they changed it, right? And then they had that cool like effect that Sega Institute did for this logo, where it like flipped, kind of like the Gunstar Heroes start screen. Yeah. And then they had that iconic like singing, it's Sega, and it's really sick. And I really like the whole hand coming out and saying it presents. Very unique logo. I wish they did more of these kind of logos, in the present time. I know that Yakuza used to have their own too. You want me to put yours? I know yours is Jurassic Park. Why Jurassic Park?
I just thought this was a really funny one, and this, like you said, it's the one where it really stands out, and you're like, oh, they're doing something different here. I think it's not so much the logo treatment, but to combine it with like the T-Rex popping up and saying Sega. I just think it's hilarious, and I wish they did more of this. Like, I think it would have been cool to start up every game and have a different character come in and say Sega, because, but then, I don't know, like, technically some studios probably don't even know how to make like characters talk, but Sega. So that's me.
That's the end of our episode today, right?
That's it. Yeah. So you have gone to school unknowingly. You have just taken an 1.5-hour course in visual communications. You have passed. You are now a graphic designer. Go forth.
Thank you guys for watching. This is our episode for the Sega logo for Sega Talk. We'll catch you guys next time on Sega Talk. Bye.
Bye.